I've been doing our sports facility for almost 23 years. It's pretty empowering to walk in there, kids playing, families recreating together. You've got all of that. But at the end of the day, look, we're not a civic organization built as a nonprofit. We have to turn a profit or else our patrons don't get to play. Our staff doesn't get paid. And as investors, we don't make a return if you are not building a business that has accurate and credible accounting and reporting processes to go backwards and create this with fungible math. You're setting yourself up for a huge discount when it comes time to sell your business. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of What's Next. I'm pretty excited here. I just got back from an amazing week in New Orleans, talking to a group of sports facility owners, of which I am one. So it was nice to be around my peers and longstanding friends. And I got the opportunity to share a thought about how to build a business that you don't have to sell. And I know that can sound a little bit like an oxymoron, but the idea here is if you don't have to sell it, then it means you're probably making pretty darn good money. And you've done something to make it a repeatable process that you're not beholden to live in 80, 90 hours a week. So I want to share that with you in this episode. So it's just going to be me talking through how to build and how to think about building a business that you don't have to sell. So without any further ado, let's take a look at what we were going through in New Orleans. And first and foremost, as I said, we're going to want to talk about the business that you can build that you don't have to sell. A little bit about me, owner of sports facility, owner of our investment company, Opportunity Seed, and also our golf clothing company, Galway Bay, among a few other things, but we'll get back to it on sort of talking about all of the different businesses. Just to give you a little context, we're big fans of experience, not opinion. So just giving you kind of a rundown of some of the startups that I've exited, which have been in the small hundreds of thousands into the north of 100 million in exits. So here's a few of them just from sports camps, sports businesses. As you can tell, I've had some acquisitions where we've, bought companies or taken them over and then had some exits. You can see a few of those here. And then a few of our current options. So we've got High Velocity, Axios Core, the college golf experience, Ford's Garage, which is our restaurant company. And then some of those businesses are in the process of being sold. So we've got High Velocity, V1 Sports, and our High Point office and tech building. So we talk about having a business that you don't have to sell if you don't want to. I like to think about it this way. If you're an outdoorsman, it's a smoker, not a grill plate barbecue. I like to think about it, it's a crock pot, not a microwave. It's going to take some time. It's things you want to prepare for. You don't want to be rushed into this. Oftentimes bad things happen when you're rushed. So we like to think about this as taking some time. And through that process, what are the things that we can be doing to add value? So we kind of like to think about it in the formation of a formula. I'm a big math guy, so formulas tend to work really good for me. And these are the businesses, again, that everybody wants to buy that you don't have to sell. So if we look at historically the way things come down, 80 to 90% of us have most, if not all of our net worth tied up in our businesses. And yet 25% of us don't have a transition plan of where we're going to go with that, or less than 25% actually have a plan of where we're going to go. So that leaves like 80%, 75, 80% of what are we going to do when this whole thing transacts and what's the plan to get there? So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So first thing we need to discuss is EBITDA, earnings before taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and why that matters. I'm going to say this first and foremost. We're going to talk about a lot here, but it is the starting point. It is not the ending point. But unless you understand EBITDA and the impact it's going to have on your currently running business and certainly on a transaction, you'll forever be wondering, what's my business worth, right? So that's the whole idea here. So very simply, it's the value of your business that most of us are going to pick some multiple off of. So again, when you're transacting and hopefully selling your business in the future, if that's your plan, it's going to be your EBITDA times some multiple. And that's typically an industry average. And that's going to kind of show you what you're looking at. So let's talk about what is EBITDA. In its simple form, it's the profit from operations. So if you take all of the other things, loans, taxes, et cetera, wear and tear on equipment, it's what you're making before you start running a lot of that tax accounting. And again, that's a whole separate episode of how to get to that final number. But if you basically just think about what are your operations in cash, what are your expenses against that, We're going to talk about a couple of deductions that go in there, but generally that's the basic principle. This is not an accounting term. This is your way of looking at your business and how somebody else might look at that in order to put a value on where you're going. So basic calculation, you do $4 million in top line revenue. The operations of your business run 2.5 million. Your EBITDA would be 1.5 million. Again, very simple. I'm running through that quickly because I think the meat is actually what's to follow. But just so you understand, if the multiple in your market is 10 times EBITDA, that 1.5 million then turns into an enterprise value of 15 million, right? And you can do the math on where that factors for you. I'm going to pause here because yes, the higher the EBITDA, the higher your value. That's an obvious statement. But again, if we think about this as a crock pot, not a microwave, how we build, format, and grow our businesses will make a huge difference to this higher end value. So using EBITDA way before you're thinking about selling can only benefit you and oftentimes your staff as you think about how are the ways we can maximize not just top line revenue, but obviously those operating expenses as well, because they work hand in hand. You're going to see a lot of surfing references in here. I love surfing. It's my happy place. In part, it's a lot of why I work and build businesses. So I have more days to go surfing. But I think about EBITDA as a game stat, right? So as a past professional soccer player and as a goalkeeper, especially, those stats were important. Most importantly, goals against. So in order to kind of get the highest stat, if you will, the bigger win is going to be how does our EBITDA get maximized? And when is it going to be time to sell? That will be when the market is telling you the multiple is the highest, right? So that math equation works hand in hand. So we talk about a couple of things. Adjusted EBITDA, okay? Take your regular EBITDA, and then you're going to add back in things like your salary, owner's expenses if you're not there on a day-to-day basis, any personal expenses if you're running your car, any country club expenses, whatever those things might be that are unique to you, that are not tied to the regular operations of the business, or if there's a one-time cost. I own a sports facility. If we've just resurfaced our basketball court that we're only going to do once every 10 years, that's a one-time cost. So we would add that back in. I'm going to talk about that later. So the idea here is that we're trying to normalize what our revenue is, normalize EBITDA to show to a future buyer, this is what it would look like if you take me out of the business, you take over and start running this thing, you get the idea. So how do we calculate adjusted EBITDA? Again, I'm going to rip through this, but you take that 4 million in top line minus the 2.5 of operating expenses. We're going to add back in 50 grand that may be above and beyond your salary. So if you do work, but you're paying yourself above and beyond that, you'd add that back in. Talked about my basketball court, one-time court work. We're going to add that back in. Maybe my personal car expenses, going to add that back in, which is another 90 grand. So I have 1.59 million. At my 10 multiple, you can see where we get the 15.9 million. And that's kind of the way it works. So through that, I know that's a rip course. I'll include this in the show notes, but shoot me a message if you want more details on that. So what does drive value? If it's not just EBITDA, we talked about a multiple being the baseline. I'll use that 1.5 million as the starting point, giving a $15 million value in the company. It'd be simple to say in a real estate transaction, that's basically what we're going to sell this thing for. But the reality is we're going to look at much, much more than that. And how do we get north of 15 million, even if EBITDA is only 1.5? So Warren Buffett said this the best, that managers and investors alike must understand that accounting numbers are just the beginning, not the end of a business valuation. That's what we're here to talk about. And so how do we do that? What is that creation formula? It's going to come in 5 buckets. We're going to have our risk factors, our team competencies, certainly the market opportunity, strong financials. And when you put those together, that will give you what our valuable and saleable business is, what's going to create a better life in the end. So the strategy formula for growth, pretty simple. Our past success plus our current results plus the future direction. So when we're talking to somebody looking at acquiring our business, we're going to bucket this portion of the formula into, again, past success, that's EBITDA. Current results, are we on that path? And future direction, which will be the most important. Have we set out a strategy so that if someone buys my business, I'm showing them the secret sauce and my thought process of how we do even better in the future, or else they probably wouldn't buy the business. So we want to make sure that being the final part of that equation is the most important. And side note here, for those of you looking to maybe stay on for a year or two in your business, this is a great way to convince and quite frankly, walk hand in hand with that new buyer with them in the next 2 years, because they'd love for you to come shepherd that growth plan. And in some points give you some incentive financially to be a part of that growth. And if you exceed it, you can imagine there's some pretty good upside. And if not, there might be some downside. So certainly a way to think about that. So the credible strategy, I kind of look at it like this. If you don't have a strategy or a game plan, you probably look a little bit like the pattern on the left, which is try something, you're going to stop here, wiggle around a little bit, try something else, venture off over here and end up there. And at the end of the day, you don't really know where you're going. Conversely, as most hockey sticks go, you kind of understand where you're going, building that game plan, and that's how you get there. Easiest way to get your staff involved, easiest way to measure success. And probably most importantly, when you're talking to a future buyer, to show them that you've got a history of making things happen. And that's part of that growth strategy that gets you a higher value than just a regular EBITDA multiple. So, second component, let's talk about the risks in a business and how do you reduce those, right? So a business with high risk, obviously there's going to be some discounting that goes to your purchase price. A business that has reduced those risks, you're saying to the buyer, this is a safer investment than others you may be looking at. So certainly a way to go through that. So again, 3 components. You identify the risks, you're committing the resources to taking care of those. And I also say that you're willing to get rid of any sacred cows, right? Are there any things in the business that may be buried in there that you don't want to get rid of that the future buyer may get saddled with? That can either kill a deal or certainly be a huge deduct as you go through the business. So a few of the common ones in businesses are in sort of clockwise order. If you're overly concentrated in one area or you have a lack of diversification, that can certainly be a risk. Do you have any revenue that's non-recurring? It's a one-time, might only happen once a year or once every other year. You've got low barriers to entry, meaning plenty of room for other competitors to come in and snipe business from you. Obvious one here. If there's low customer satisfaction, you're creating a lot of space for someone to move in, swoop in and grab your customers. And you have an over-reliance on the founder or the owner, where they're in there every day. And without them in the business, think about a bakery shop, right, from eMyth. If you're the baker, the only one that knows all of the recipes, and you suddenly don't show up, no cookies are getting made. So that's the way you identify risks in the business. And then consequently, if you're going to mitigate those risks, you'd start attacking each one of those bubbles, if you will, to reduce those risks and then show a future buyer that you've addressed them. So now let's talk about your team, right? The competencies formula. This one's really easy. You take their IQ plus their EQ minus the ego. And then oftentimes is wrapped around with where us as founders, we get stuck is I've got a great IQ. I certainly have an EQ for the business. My emotional quotient, if you will, says that I can do this. But then ultimately my ego is so tied to it that I can't let go. And my team, as go we, so go they, tend to follow that. And we end up building this business that a future buyer may look at and say, this doesn't quite make any sense because I've got this ego component that doesn't really allow me as the new owner to step in and put my thumbprint on the business. So again, just like before, we've got sort of 6 things we can identify in team competencies that could get passed on to a future buyer. We want to look at, are they part of our strategic orientation? Are they results oriented? Do they have a knowledge of the business? Are they collaborative and show an influence within the business? Is there a learning development component? Because any future buyer is going to want to know that your team is diving in on those processes. Is there a pending change in leadership? And if so, do you have a leadership transition plan? And then ultimately, are they taking a team approach? So the middle is that team member. And then your job as the current owner, talking to future owner, will be within my team, I've wrapped my arms around the way we are going to address each and every one of these components. Again, these are all tied in. So you are also reducing risk when your team competencies are high. So now we look at the market opportunity, right? So at the end of the day, this all is great, but if you are not in a market that you're going to be able to serve and solve problems, probably not a business worth selling and acquiring. So this one's a little more complex, but you take that market size and the readiness for what you're doing, plus that compelling product or service, right? What problem are you solving in the world? And then I think this is the most important in today's day and age is, do you have an acquisition for customer plan success rate? Meaning, do you know without a doubt how to go get more customers and what methods and what channels could you go get them? So you're saying to a future buyer, if I had more money, if I had more access through marketing, could I get more of the people who are already paying me for these services? And future acquirer is going to say, yes, that's why I'm buying you. I want to deploy more capital to go acquire more customers. to leverage those first two things, which are growing that market size and then obviously knowing that you've got a compelling product or service, right? So certainly something as you look at the entire formula, the market opportunity will be one that you want to absolutely focus on. This kind of goes without saying, but I'll be honest with you, we can get so wrapped up in just the excitement of running our business. And I've been doing our sports facility for almost 23 years. It's pretty empowering to walk in there, kids playing, families recreating together. You've got all of that. But at the end of the day, look, we're not a civic organization built as a nonprofit. We have to turn a profit or else our patrons don't get to play. Our staff doesn't get paid. And as investors, we don't make a return. So we've got to have a strong formula for our financials. Ultimately, it's going to be simple four things. We've got our revenue growth met with our metrics management. We've got a reliable profit center. And at the end of the day, we have accurate and credible reporting. And I say this one at the end because if you are not building a business that has accurate and credible accounting and reporting processes to go backwards and create this with fungible math, you're setting yourself up for a huge discount when it comes time to sell your business. So make sure, whether it's with QuickBooks or any other accounting system, and certainly by leveraging an accountant or CPA, you're making sure that all of those things are in place. To kind of wrap it all up, we've got our credible growth strategy with our risk factor reduction. Ultimately, we've addressed our team competencies. We've taken the market opportunity and seized it. And then we built a strong financial plan around that with some accountabilities. And ultimately, you're going to have a valuable and sellable business. And you won't just be selling on EBITDA. That's the whole idea here. There is so much more. But if you leave these 5 factors to a whim, at the end of the day, someone's just going to come in, look at EBITDA, multiply it by probably the lowest denominator in your industry, and that's going to be your offer. If you haven't solved these other things, it's about the best you can expect to get. So keeping the end in mind, if it might be to grow and sell a business or have a business you don't have to sell, make sure that you're addressing these on a quarterly and annual basis with your team. Don't do it in a vacuum, right? Your team will love to get involved, even if it's just to create enterprise value, because ultimately that's how they get measured on success. So a simple fact that all businesses eventually transition one of 3 ways, and that is around the dinner table, right? It's going to be a family member, a son, a daughter, maybe somebody that you know personally. It's going to happen at a board table where you've actually sat down and created a process to have a transaction, and you're out there seeking buyers and you've got these packages put together, everything's buttoned up. And at the board table, you've got multiple offers coming in. So that's certainly one way. And what I'm trying to help you avoid is being on the operating table, right? You've had a heart attack, something horrible has happened, and your trust, your family, your spouse is left to, quite frankly, have a fire sale because none of this was put together. You did the best you could, but in a dire moment, now there's a panic, now there's a distress sale, and that creates the worst outcome. So I think really the best one obviously is in the middle, where you've got a chance to have multiple bidders. It could be that you've built a business that you'd like to pass on through generations, in which case that's happening around the dinner table. But above all, we are trying to stay away from the operating table scenario so that you get to maximize future value for you and generations to come. With that, I'm going to wrap. Obviously, if you'd like to know more, check out the show notes below. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email, hit me a DM. We've got all the information there for you. I think this was hugely beneficial for our group at the US Indoor Conference. So thanks you guys for letting me speak there. I hope this has been beneficial for you as you're thinking about a business, or maybe you're in your business already and you're wondering, how do I get this thing to be more than just my job? I'd love it to be an ATM that I don't have to sell, but if I do, I'm getting the highest value. And that's what we're here for, right? In your what's next, which might be the transition and transaction of your business. We really hope that we're able to help do that for you. So if we can help even just to talk you through what this framework looks like and help you build a better plan, we do that every day for our clients. We do that for founders and kind of help them think about that with their team. Reach out to us, give us a thumbs up, and share this with others who you think should need to hear what we're doing and hear what it's about. And more than anything, we just love being part of the community with you. So thanks for joining us on What's Next.